I'm Lieutenant Colonel Ally James, 39, an Air Force officer who earned my rank the long way, from the flight line to command. For years, I backed my family, paid their bills, and celebrated every one of my brother's milestones like they were my own. But at his promotion ceremony, when my parents mocked me in front of his squadron, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been dismissed or humiliated by the very people you've supported? If so, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to reclaim your worth after being underestimated, hit like and subscribe for more true stories about standing your ground and moving forward. What happened next might surprise you. I grew up believing I was invisible. Not literally, I showed up in photos, answered when called, took up space at the dinner table. But in the way that mattered, in the economy of my parents' attention, I might as well have been a shadow. My brother Ethan was the sun, and I orbited quietly, content to reflect whatever light reached me. We were 6 years apart, which meant that by the time he was stumbling through high school calculus, I was already wearing the uniform. Lieutenant Ally James, United States Air Force, fresh out of the academy with a pilot slot, and something to prove to absolutely no one but myself. Ethan was 18 then, all elbows and ambition, talking about ROTC like it was a secret he'd discovered on his own. I remember sitting at the kitchen table during my leave, watching him fill out the application, our mother hovering behind him with the kind of focus she'd never brought to my own paperwork years earlier. "This is it," she kept saying. "This is his path." I didn't correct her. Didn't mention that I'd already walked a version of it, that I knew which forms mattered and which were just theater. I waited until she left the room, then leaned over and pointed to a section he'd missed. "Extracurriculars," I said. "They want to see leadership, not just participation." He looked up, surprised I was still there. "You think I should add the debate team?" "I think you should add anything where you made decisions that affected other people. That's what they're looking for." He nodded, wrote it down, didn't say thank you. That became the pattern. I'd come home between deployments, and there would be some new crisis, scholarship applications, flight school interviews, his roommate drama at the detachment. I'd offer advice, make calls to people I knew, once even drove 4 hours to help him move out of a lease that had gone sideways. He accepted it all with the casual assumption of someone who'd never had to ask twice. Our father liked to joke that Ethan had the right temperament for command, by which he meant Ethan was loud where I was measured, confident where I was careful. Dad had done a stint in the Army decades back, long enough to have opinions, but not long enough to understand how much the military had changed. He saw Ethan and saw himself. He saw me and saw an exception he couldn't quite categorize. I made captain at 26, right on schedule. Ethan called to congratulate me, then spent 20 minutes talking about his own upcoming commissioning ceremony. I didn't mind. I was used to it. By then I'd logged hundreds of flight hours, including a deployment to Kandahar that I couldn't discuss in detail. I came back different, not broken, but recalibrated. I understood things about fear and leadership that I couldn't explain at a dinner table. My parents asked if I was okay, and when I said yes, they seemed relieved to move on. Ethan pinned on his second lieutenant bars 3 years after I made captain. I was stationed in Germany, so I watched the ceremony on a choppy video call, my mother's phone camera swinging wildly between Ethan's face and the crowd. She cried. My father saluted, even though he'd been out for decades, and it wasn't quite appropriate. Ethan stood there, grinning, 22 years old and certain the world was about to open up for him. And it did. He got a decent assignment, flew training missions, networked with the right people. When he called, it was always to update me on his progress, sometimes to ask for advice that he'd repackage as his own insight later. I didn't call him on it. What would have been the point? I transferred to operations after my 3rd deployment. It wasn't a demotion, though my parents seemed to think it was. "So you're not flying anymore?" my mother asked, her voice careful. "I'm managing the people who fly," I said. "It's a different kind of responsibility." "But you loved flying." "I still do. This is how I serve now." She didn't understand, and I didn't push it. My father was more blunt. "Sounds like a desk job," he said. "Sounds like you're stepping back." I could have explained that operational command at this level meant coordinating missions across multiple airframes, managing personnel, making decisions that affected hundreds of lives. I could have told him about the medevac escort I'd flown in Helmand Province, the one that had gone sideways in ways I still couldn't discuss because half of it was classified. Instead, I said, "It's where they need me," and let it drop. Ethan made first lieutenant, then captain. He called less often, but when he did, there was a new edge to his voice. Confidence shading into condescension. "You should have stayed in the cockpit if you wanted to stay relevant," he said once, laughing like it was a joke. I was a major by then, running a joint training wing with 300 personnel under my purview. I didn't bother correcting him. Around that time, he started talking about his new commanding officer, Major David Hale. "He's the real deal," Ethan said. "Flew combat missions in Afghanistan, got a Bronze Star, knows everybody. He's the kind of officer I want to be." I didn't recognize the name, but that wasn't unusual. The Air Force is large, and my deployments had been years earlier. I was glad Ethan had a good mentor. He needed one. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that David Hale had been on the ground in Helmand Province in the summer of 2013, part of a small forward operating unit that got pinned down during what was supposed to be a routine supply movement. I'd been flying an armed escort that day, one of two A-10 Warthogs tasked with providing overwatch. When the ambush hit, we diverted, and what followed was 40 minutes of the kind of close air support that doesn't make highlight reels because it's too frantic, too close, too dependent on split-second decisions that could kill the people you're trying to save. We got them out. All of them. I took shrapnel in the process, enough to earn a Distinguished Flying Cross and 3 weeks of recovery, most of which I spent furious that I wasn't back in the cockpit. The citation was classified for years because of the mission details, and by the time it was declassified, I was in a different career phase. I didn't talk about it. Not because I was modest, but because the people who needed to know already did, and everyone else wouldn't understand what it meant. Ethan never asked about my deployments. Not really. He'd say, "So what was Afghanistan like?" and then check his phone before I could answer. My parents were the same. They wanted the headline version, the thing they could mention to their friends. "Our daughter served overseas." It sounded good. It didn't require details. So when Ethan's promotion to captain came through and my parents started planning a family gathering to celebrate, I didn't expect anything different. I was lieutenant colonel by then, stationed 2 states away, running operations for a wing that had just earned top marks in a readiness inspection. I should have been busy. But he was my brother, and despite everything, I wanted to be there. I requested leave, booked a flight, pressed my service dress blues, and drove 3 hours to the base where his ceremony would be held. I arrived early, checked in at the gate, and parked near the building where they'd set up the reception. The ceremony itself was fine. Ethan stood at attention while his squadron commander read the orders, pinned on the new rank, shook his hand. He looked sharp, composed, every inch the officer my parents had always wanted. They sat in the front row, beaming. The reception was held in a wood-paneled room that smelled like floor polish and coffee that had been sitting too long. There were maybe 40 people, squadron mates, a few family friends, some junior officers who were there because attendance was expected. I stood near the back in my service dress, the lieutenant colonel insignia on my shoulders visible, but apparently not interesting enough for anyone to notice. My mother found me first, kissed my cheek, told me I looked thin. "You're working too hard," she said. "You need to take care of yourself." "I'm fine, Mom." "Are you eating enough?" "You know how you get when you're stressed." I assured her I was eating, sleeping, functioning like a normal human being. She patted my arm and drifted back toward my father, who was holding court near the refreshments table. Ethan was surrounded by well-wishers, shaking hands, laughing at jokes I couldn't hear. He saw me and waved, a quick acknowledgement that didn't invite approach. I waved back and stayed where I was. Someone had set up a small table with a cake that read, "Congratulations, Captain James," in blue icing. My mother positioned herself next to it, holding a plastic cup of punch like it was champagne. She raised it high, waiting for the room to quiet. "I just want to say a few words," she announced. The conversations dimmed. People turned. We are so proud of Ethan. He's worked so hard to get here, and we always knew he was destined for great things. To our hero. She pointed at Ethan, her smile wide and unshakable. My father stepped forward, grinning. That's right. Our son, the officer. Finally someone in this family doing something useful. He looked at me when he said it. Not a glance, not an accident. A deliberate look, paired with a laugh that suggested he was joking but wasn't. The room chuckled, uncomfortable but compliant. I felt my spine straighten, an autonomic response. My face stayed neutral. I'd trained for worse than this. Ethan looked down, maybe embarrassed, maybe just avoiding eye contact. My mother sipped her punch, oblivious or uncaring. The moment stretched. Then the door opened. Major David Hale walked in, still in his flight suit, carrying a small wooden plaque under one arm. He was maybe 35, compact and precise, the kind of officer who looked like he'd been genetically engineered for competence. He scanned the room, nodded at a few people, then his eyes landed on me. He stopped. His expression shifted: recognition, confusion, something close to shock. He walked toward me, weaving through the crowd with the single-mindedness of someone on a mission. People stepped aside. My father was mid-sentence, saying something about Ethan's next assignment, when Hale stopped directly in front of me. The room went quiet. "Ma'am," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "You're the one from Hellmand?" I blinked. It took a second to place him, thinner than, younger, caked in dust and blood that wasn't his. Forward Operating Base Murphy. The supply convoy. The ambush. "Major Hale," I said. "It's good to see you." He didn't smile. He came to attention, sharp and formal, and saluted. "Ma'am, it's an honor." I returned the salute, automatic, professional. He held it a beat longer than necessary, his eyes locked on mine, and I realized he wasn't just acknowledging me. He was making a point. The room was silent now, the kind of silence that has weight. My father's mouth hung open. My mother looked between us, confused. Ethan stood frozen near the cake, his new rank still shiny and unfamiliar on his shoulders. Hale lowered his salute, stepped back, and turned to Ethan. "Captain James, congratulations on your promotion. Your sister is a hell of an officer. I hope you know that." Ethan nodded, mute. Hale handed him the plaque, shook his hand, and turned back to me. "I didn't know you were here, ma'am. If I'd known, I would have made sure you were properly recognized." "That's not necessary," I said. "It is," he said. "But I understand if you prefer it this way." He nodded once more, then walked to the refreshments table, poured himself a cup of coffee, and started talking to one of the other officers like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. My mother approached me, her face a mask of polite confusion. "What was that about?" "We served together," I said. "In Afghanistan." "Oh. Well, that's nice." She didn't ask for details. My father was less diplomatic. He cornered me near the door, his voice low. "You never mentioned you knew a CO. It didn't come up. You could have said something. Made it a bigger deal." I looked at him, this man who'd spent my entire adulthood dismissing my career as either reckless or irrelevant, and felt nothing but tired. "I don't make things a bigger deal than they are," I said. "I just do the job." He frowned, started to say something else, then thought better of it. Ethan found me as I was leaving. "Hey," he said. "Wait." I stopped. He looked uncomfortable, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes anywhere but on me. "Why didn't you say you were in Hellmand? You never asked." "I didn't know it was important." "It wasn't. Not to you." He flinched. "That's not fair. Isn't it?" I kept my voice even. "Ethan, I've been in for 17 years. I've deployed 4 times. I've held commands, run operations, made decisions that kept people alive. And not once have you asked me what any of that was like. So no, I didn't bring up Hellmand, because I didn't think you'd care." He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "I care. You care now. Because someone you respect made it matter. That's different." I didn't wait for a response. I walked to my car, got in, and drove back to my hotel. My phone buzzed twice, once from my mother, once from Ethan. I didn't check the messages until the next morning. "Mom, that was awkward. You could have handled it better." Ethan, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go like that. I deleted both. I flew back to my duty station the next day, 1,300 hours wheels up, the kind of flight where you stare out the window and think about nothing in particular. By the time I landed, I'd compartmentalized the whole event into a mental folder labeled family and filed it next to every other uncomfortable gathering I'd endured. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was clarity. I'd spent years making allowances, offering support, showing up without expectation of acknowledgement. I'd done it because that's what you do for family, or at least that's what I'd been raised to believe. But standing in that reception hall, watching my father laugh at my expense while my mother toasted the son who'd never had to fight for her attention, I realized something simple. I was done. Not done with them, necessarily. Just done expecting them to see me. Colonel Naomi Vargas was waiting in my office when I got back. She was 52, sharp-eyed, with the kind of posture that made you stand straighter just by proximity. She'd been my mentor since I was a captain, one of the few senior officers who'd treated me like a person instead of a quota or a curiosity. "You look like you had a great time," she said, not looking up from the file she was reading. "It was fine." "That bad?" I dropped my bag on the desk, sat down. My parents held a reception for my brother's promotion. They toasted him as the family hero. My father made a joke about me finally doing something useful. Then my brother's CO walked in, recognized me from Hellmand, and saluted me in front of everyone. Vargas looked up. "David Hale. You know him?" "By reputation. Good officer. Flew combat support in Afghanistan, did some time in joint operations." She tilted her head. "So he recognized you from the medevac escort?" "Apparently. And your family didn't know?" "They never asked." Vargas set the file down, leaned back. "You never told them about the DFC?" "It was classified for 3 years. By the time it wasn't, I was in a different job. It didn't seem relevant." "It's relevant if your family thinks you're dead weight." I didn't respond. Vargas studied me for a moment, then sighed. "Ally, you're one of the best officers I've worked with. You're precise, strategic, and you don't let ego cloud your judgment. But you have a blind spot when it comes to your family." "I know." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm sitting, you keep giving them chances to see you, and they keep choosing not to. At some point, that's on you." It was a hard thing to hear, but she wasn't wrong. I'd been operating under the assumption that consistency would eventually earn recognition, that if I just kept showing up and doing the work, they'd notice. But people don't notice what they're not looking for. "I'm not going to the next family dinner," I said. Vargas smiled. "Good. Now let's talk about your next assignment." She handed me the file she'd been reading. It was a set of orders, freshly printed, transferring me from the Joint Training Wing to an Air Mobility Wing leadership position. Command of my own unit. Over 300 personnel, split between active duty and reserve, responsible for everything from strategic airlift to aerial refueling. It was a significant step up, the kind of assignment that marked you as someone the Air Force was investing in. "When?" I asked. 60 days. You'll take command in a formal ceremony at McGuire. They want you there by mid-November." I looked at the orders, then at Vargas. "You recommended me for this." "I did. You've earned it." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of it settle. This was what mattered. Not my parents' approval, not Ethan's belated recognition. This. The mission. The people under my command. The work. "Thank you, ma'am." "Don't thank me. Just don't screw it up." She stood, straightened her uniform. "And Ally? Let the record speak for itself. You don't need to explain yourself to people who've already decided not to listen." She left, and I sat there for a long time, staring at the orders. That evening, I drafted a short email to my mother. "I won't be able to make Thanksgiving this year. I'm transferring to a new command and will be in the middle of turnover. I'll call when I'm settled." I didn't mention Ethan, didn't offer an explanation beyond the logistical. I hit send and felt lighter. 2 days later, my mother called. I let it go to voicemail. "Ally, this is dramatic. We didn't mean anything by what we said at the reception. You're being too sensitive. Call me back." I didn't. Ethan sent a text. "Hey, I know things were weird. I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I replied, "I'm in the middle of a transfer. We'll talk later." later became a flexible concept. The next 3 weeks were a blur of briefings, handoffs, and logistics. I met with my successor, a sharp young lieutenant colonel named Briggs who asked good questions and took notes like his life depended on it. I walked him through the personnel files, the ongoing projects, the landmines to avoid. I handed over my command with the same precision I brought to everything else. Meanwhile, word got around. Hale had filed a formal commendation through official channels, a memo that referenced the Hellman mission and my actions in detail. It wasn't flashy, but it circulated. People I hadn't spoken to in years sent congratulations. A few junior officers who'd heard the story approached me in the halls, asking questions I deflected politely. I didn't need the attention. But I didn't stop it either. My parents heard about the transfer through someone else, an old family friend whose son served in the Air Force and happened to see the announcement. My mother called again, this time leaving a voicemail that was half confusion, half hurt. "Why didn't you tell us you were taking a new command? We had to hear it from the Robinsons. This is a big deal, ally. You should have said something." I listened to the voicemail twice, then deleted it. Ethan tried harder. He called, texted, even sent an email with the subject line, "Can we please talk?" I responded once, "I'm not angry. I'm just busy. We'll catch up when things settle." It was true mostly. I wasn't angry. I was just done investing energy in people who didn't invest back. The change of command ceremony at McGuire was held on a cold morning in mid-November. The sky was gray, the wind sharp enough to cut through dress blues. I stood on the platform next to the outgoing commander, a colonel named Patterson who'd held the position for 3 years and looked ready to retire. Vargas was there, representing the higher command. A few hundred personnel stood in formation, faces young and old, all watching. The ceremony itself was ritual. Orders read, guidon passed, salutes exchanged. I gave a short speech, no grand promises, no inspirational platitudes. Just a clear statement of expectations. We exist to move people and equipment where they need to be, when they need to be there. That's the mission. Everything else is secondary. I expect professionalism, accountability, and respect for the people you work with. In return, I'll fight for the resources you need to do the job right. Let's get to work. Patterson handed me the guidon, the flag heavy and familiar in my hand. Vargas saluted, I returned it, and it was done. I was in command. Afterward, there was a small reception in the wing headquarters building. Junior officers introduced themselves, senior NCOs sized me up, and I shook hands until my wrist ached. No family attended. I hadn't invited them. Late that afternoon, I found myself alone in my new office, a space that still smelled like the previous occupant's coffee preference. I sat behind the desk, looked at the walls that would soon hold my own plaques and photos, and felt something close to peace. My phone buzzed. A text from Hale, "Congratulations on the command, ma'am. Well deserved." I replied, "Thank you, Major. Hope your squadron is treating you well." A pause, then, "They are. Captain James is learning. Slowly, but he's learning." I smiled at that. Another text came through, this time from an unknown number. "This is Lieutenant Sullivan, ma'am. I'm assigned to your wing. Looking forward to serving under your command." I replied, "Welcome aboard, Lieutenant. Let's make it count." I set the phone down and stared out the window at the flight line, where a C-17 was taxiing into position. The engines roared, the aircraft lifted, and I watched it climb until it disappeared into the clouds. This was what I'd signed up for. Not recognition, not validation. Just the work, done well, with people who understood what it meant. The rest was noise. Ethan struggled. I didn't hear about it directly, of course. But word travels in the Air Force, especially when you're connected to the same chain of command in even the loosest sense. Hale remained his commanding officer, and Hale was the kind of leader who didn't tolerate mediocrity. 6 weeks after I took command at McGuire, I ran into a pilot from Ethan's squadron at a joint readiness conference in Virginia. We were standing in line for coffee during a break, and she recognized my name. "You're Captain James's sister?" Lieutenant Commander Roth asked. She was Navy, assigned to a joint evaluation team, mid-40s with the kind of weathered competence that comes from decades at sea. "I am," I said. "How's he doing?" She hesitated, which told me everything. He's figuring it out. Major Hale's a tough mentor, but fair. Your brother's got potential. He just needs to stop assuming the rank does the work for him. I nodded, unsurprised. That sounds about right. Hale talks about you sometimes, she added. Not in detail, but enough that we know you're someone worth respecting. I think your brother's starting to realize he's been operating in your shadow without knowing it. He'll figure it out, I said. Or he won't. She gave me a sharp look. You're harder on him than Hale is. I'm realistic. There's a difference. I didn't elaborate and she didn't push. But she wasn't wrong. I'd stopped carrying the weight of Ethan's success or failure. He was a grown man, an officer in the United States Air Force, responsible for his own decisions. If he wanted to build a career, he'd have to do it on his own merits. I'd given him enough head starts. Around that same time, my parents tried again. My father called from a number I didn't recognize, so I answered without thinking. Ally, it's Dad. I almost hung up. Hi. Your mother and I have been trying to reach you. I've been busy. We know. We heard about your new command. That's a big deal. It is. A pause. He was waiting for me to fill the silence, to make it easy for him. I didn't. Finally, he said, we'd like to come visit. See where you're stationed, maybe take you to dinner. That's not necessary. It's not about necessary. We're your parents. And I'm your daughter, who you dismissed in front of a room full of people because I wasn't the child you wanted me to be. The words came out calm, factual. Not angry, just true. He sputtered. That was a joke, Ally. You're being too sensitive. Maybe. Or maybe you've been dismissive for so long you don't recognize it anymore. We're proud of you, he said, and it sounded hollow. Are you? Or are you embarrassed that you didn't realize what I'd accomplished until someone else pointed it out? Silence. I'm not angry, I continued. But I'm also not going to pretend the last 20 years didn't happen. You have my email. If you want to rebuild, start there. With honesty. Not with visits and dinners that pretend everything's fine. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were steady. Later that evening, I got an email from my mother. It was 3 paragraphs long, full of justifications and deflections, ending with, "We just want to be a family again." I read it twice, then filed it away without responding. Colonel Vargas visited McGuire in early December, part of a routine inspection tour. She found me in the operations center, reviewing a fuel logistics report that didn't add up. "You look busy," she said. "Always." She pulled up a chair. "I heard your wing earned top readiness scores for the quarter." "We did. Command suits you." I looked up. "It's what I was trained for. It's more than that. You're not just managing. You're leading. There's a difference." I set the report aside. "What brings you here, ma'am?" "I doubt it's just to compliment my readiness scores." She smiled. "I wanted to see how you're settling in. And to check that you're not drowning in family drama." "I'm not. I've set boundaries." "Good." She stood, walked to the window overlooking the flight line. "You know, I've watched a lot of officers burn out trying to prove themselves to people who'll never appreciate them. The best ones learn to let that go. The mediocre ones keep chasing it until it destroys them." "Which one am I?" "You're the one who stopped chasing." She turned back. "That memo Hale filed? It's made its way through the channels. People know who you are now. Not because you demanded it, but because the record finally caught up." I nodded slowly. "And my family? They'll either come around or they won't. Either way, it's not your problem anymore." She was right. It wasn't. That night, I sat in my office after most of the wing had gone home and drafted a short email to Lieutenant Mark Sullivan, one of the young officers who'd reached out when I first took command. He'd asked for mentorship, and I'd agreed to a monthly check-in. "Lieutenant Sullivan, let's talk about leadership. Not the kind they teach in textbooks, but the kind you live. First rule, let your record outlast their opinions. People will doubt you. They'll dismiss you, underestimate you, try to take credit for your work. Let them. Your job isn't to fight for recognition. It's to do the work so well that recognition becomes inevitable. Second rule, choose your battles. Not everything deserves a response. Some things you let slide because they're not worth your energy. Others you confront because staying silent would compromise your integrity. Learn the difference. Third rule, Take care of your people. They're not tools. They're human beings with families and fears and futures. If you remember that, they'll follow you anywhere. Looking forward to our next conversation. Respectfully, Colonel James. I hit send and felt something shift. This was how I'd move forward. Not by convincing my family I was worth their respect, but by shaping the next generation of officers who'd never have to. A week later, Hale sent a brief email. Colonel, I'm forwarding you an after-action report from a joint training exercise. Captain James performed well. Thought you'd want to know. Attached was a 3-page assessment. Ethan had led a flight coordination during a simulated combat scenario and, according to Hale, demonstrated improved judgment and communication under pressure. It was progress. Small, but real. I replied, "Thank you, Major. I appreciate the update." I didn't forward it to my parents. They'd hear about it if Ethan wanted them to. As for me, I had a wing to run. The next 18 months passed quickly. My wing ran operations across 3 continents, logged over 10,000 flight hours, and maintained a safety record that made the higher-ups take notice. I mentored junior officers, mediated conflicts, allocated resources, and occasionally flew as a mission observer to stay sharp. I was good at my job. I knew it, my people knew it, and eventually, the promotion board knew it too. In March, I received word that I'd been selected for promotion to colonel. Oh, 6. Full bird. The kind of rank that doesn't come easy, that represents decades of competence and trust. The notification came via official email at 0700 on a Tuesday. I read it twice, set my coffee down, and allowed myself 30 seconds of satisfaction before moving on to the day's agenda. Vargas called an hour later. Congratulations, Colonel. Thank you, ma'am. You've earned it. The ceremony's scheduled for May, correct? Yes, ma'am. McGuire. 1600 hours. I'll be there. An ally. Ma'am? This is the rank where people start watching everything you do. Not because they're looking for mistakes, but because they're deciding if you're ready for the next level. Stay sharp. Always. The official promotion ceremony was set for May 15th. I sent a brief email to my parents and Ethan, informing them of the date and location. I didn't invite them explicitly, but I didn't exclude them either. The ball was in their court. My mother responded within an hour. We'll be there. So proud of you. Ethan's response came 2 days later. Wouldn't miss it. Congratulations, sis. I felt nothing reading those messages. No relief, no resentment. Just acknowledgement. Meanwhile, my days were consumed with transition planning. A promotion to 06 meant new responsibilities, likely a new command down the line. I was being positioned for something bigger, though the details were still forming. I met with Vargas in mid-April to discuss options. They're looking at you for a composite wing, she said, spreading a folder across her desk. Multi-mission, about 500 personnel, mix of active and reserve. It's a challenge, but you're ready. Where? That's still being determined. Could be stateside, could be overseas. You'll know by July. I nodded. What's the timeline for transition? You take command in early next year. That gives you 6 months to wrap up at McGuire and prepare. It was the trajectory I'd been working toward for years, and yet it felt surreal. Not because I didn't think I deserved it, but because I'd spent so long being invisible that visibility still felt foreign. Vargas must have seen something in my face. You look concerned. I'm not. Just processing. Second-guessing yourself? No, ma'am. Good. Because you're one of the best officers I've worked with, and if you start doubting that now, I'll be deeply disappointed. I smiled. Understood. The promotion ceremony itself was held on the same flight line where I'd taken command of the wing 18 months earlier. The weather cooperated, clear skies, mild temperature, a light breeze that kept the flags moving. About 300 personnel stood in formation, along with a handful of senior officers from the regional command. My parents arrived early, dressed formally, looking older than I remembered. Ethan came in uniform, now a major himself. He'd been promoted 6 months earlier, a fact I'd learned through official channels rather than a phone call. We exchanged brief greetings. Professional, cordial, distant. The ceremony followed the usual script. Orders read, rank insignia removed, new insignia pinned. Vargas did the honors, her hands steady as she affixed the silver eagles to my shoulders. She stepped back, saluted, and I returned it. Then she leaned in slightly and said, "Well done, ally." "Thank you, ma'am." I gave a short speech. No grand declarations, no emotional appeals. Just a clear statement about the work ahead and the people who made it possible. "Leadership is a trust," I said, my voice carrying across the formation. "It's not about titles or rank. It's about the responsibility we accept when we put on this uniform. To serve with integrity, to lead with humility, and to never forget that the mission depends on every single person doing their job well. I'm honored to continue that work with all of you." The applause was polite but genuine. Afterward, there was a small reception in the wing headquarters. My parents hovered near the refreshments, clearly uncertain how to approach me. Ethan stayed close to them, his posture stiff. Eventually, my mother worked up the courage. "Ally, that was a beautiful ceremony." "Thank you. We're so proud of you." "We always have been." I looked at her, this woman who'd spent decades making it clear that I was secondary, and felt a strange kind of pity. "I appreciate that," I said, my tone neutral. My father stepped forward. "Colonel, that's really something." "It is. We should've. I mean, we didn't realize." He trailed off, searching for words that wouldn't come. "It's fine," I said. "Really?" Ethan cleared his throat. "Can we talk? Privately?" I glanced at my watch. "I have about 10 minutes before I need to get back." We stepped outside, walking toward the edge of the flight line where the noise of the reception faded. He looked uncomfortable, hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "You've said that before." "I know. But I mean it this time." He looked up. "I used to think you just got lucky. That you were in the right place at the right time, or that people cut you slack because you were a woman and they needed the numbers. I was wrong." I waited. "You're a better officer than I'll probably ever be," he continued. "And I spent years not seeing that because I was too focused on myself." "I'm sorry." It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. I let it sit for a moment, then nodded. "Apology accepted." "That's it? What else do you want me to say?" "I don't know. That we can start over? That things can be different." I considered that. "Ethan, I don't need things to be different. I need them to be honest. If you want a relationship, it has to be built on who we actually are, not who Mom and Dad wanted us to be. Can you do that?" He nodded slowly. "I can try. Then we'll see." I checked my watch. "I need to get back." He saluted, a gesture that felt more genuine than any of our previous interactions. I returned it, and we walked back to the reception together. My parents left shortly after, offering polite goodbyes and promises to stay in touch. I didn't hold my breath. But I also didn't close the door entirely. The rest of the evening was a blur of congratulations and small talk. By the time the last guests left, I was exhausted. 2 years later, I stood in a different building on a different base, wearing the same silver eagles and a different weight of responsibility. The composite wing command had come through, just as Vargas predicted. 500 personnel, 3 mission sets, operations spanning 2 continents. It was complex, demanding, and exactly where I wanted to be. Ethan was overseas by then, a major running a logistics squadron in the Pacific. We emailed occasionally, brief updates that felt less obligatory than they used to. He'd grown into his rank, learned the difference between confidence and competence, started mentoring younger officers the way I once mentored him. I'd hear about it through mutual contacts, and I was glad. My parents had settled into a tentative respect. They called less often, but when they did, the conversations were quieter, less performative. My mother asked about my work without immediately pivoting to Ethan. My father stopped making jokes at my expense. It wasn't warmth exactly, but it was honesty. The promotion ceremony for my new command was held on a cold morning in November. Smaller audience this time, mostly personnel from the wing itself. Vargas attended, now a brigadier general and still my fiercest advocate. The ceremony followed the same ritual, orders, guidance, speech. I kept it short. "We're here to execute the mission with precision and integrity. That's the standard. Meet it, and we'll accomplish extraordinary things. Fall short, and we'll fix it together. Let's get to work." Afterward, as people filtered out, Ethan appeared. I hadn't expected him. He was supposed to be deployed, but there he was, in his service dress, looking older and more grounded than I remembered. "Surprise," he said. "What are you doing here?" "Mid-tour leave. I timed it so I could be here." He stepped closer, came to attention, and saluted. Not the casual acknowledgement we'd exchanged at my last ceremony, but a full, formal salute. The kind you give a superior officer you genuinely respect. I returned it, surprised by the tightness in my chest. He lowered his hand. "I wanted to be here. To see this. Because you deserve to have family who shows up." "Thank you," I said quietly. "I mean it, ally. I know I was late figuring it out, but I see you now. And I'm proud to be your brother." It was enough. Not perfect, not erasing years of dismissal, but enough. We stood there for a moment, two officers on a cold flight line, and I realized that this small, honest acknowledgement was more valuable than any ceremony. My parents arrived late, slipping into the back of the room just as the reception started. They didn't make a scene, didn't demand attention. They simply stood there, watching, and when I caught my mother's eye, she nodded. A small gesture, but deliberate. I nodded back. That evening, after everyone had left, I sat in my new office and stared out at the flight line. A C-17 was taxiing for departure, engines roaring, lights cutting through the dusk. Vargas's words from years earlier echoed, "Let the record speak for itself." It had. Not loudly, not with fanfare, but steadily, undeniably. The missions flown, the people led, the decisions made under pressure. The record was there, and it outlasted every dismissal, every joke, every moment I'd been invisible. Recognition, I'd learned, wasn't a reward. It was a record finally catching up. And sometimes, if you were patient, the people who mattered most would catch up too. I stood, straightened my uniform, and walked out into the night. There was work to do, and I was exactly where I needed to be. Respect, once demanded, fades. Earned, it stays. I left the ceremony early, as I always did. Not out of rudeness, but because the work didn't stop for celebrations. There was a readiness briefing at 0600 the next morning, a personnel issue that needed resolution, and a budget reconciliation that had been sitting on my desk for 3 days. The rank on my shoulders didn't change the fundamentals. People still needed leadership, aircraft still needed maintenance, missions still needed execution. Ethan caught up with me in the parking lot. "You're leaving already?" "I have work." "It's your promotion ceremony. You're allowed to enjoy it." I unlocked my car, tossed my cover onto the passenger seat. I did enjoy it. Now I'm going back to the office. He leaned against the door frame, preventing me from closing it. "Can I ask you something?" "You're going to anyway. Do you ever regret it?" "The sacrifices, the missed family stuff, all the years you spent proving yourself to people who didn't notice." I looked at him, this man who'd once been a boy I'd helped through calculus, and felt the distance between who we'd been and who we'd become. "No," I said simply. Because I wasn't proving myself to them. I was building something that mattered. What about now? Now that they see you. Now it's just facts. They can accept them or not. Either way, I have a wing to run. He stepped back, letting me close the door. Through the window, I saw him shake his head, half smiling. "You're the toughest person I know. I'm just clear about what matters." I drove back to the base, checked in with the night operations desk, and spent 2 hours reviewing the next week's flight schedule. By the time I left, it was past 2200 hours. The base was quiet, most personnel either home or in the barracks. I walked to my quarters, the air cold enough to see my breath. Inside, I changed into civilian clothes, made tea, and sat at the small desk where I kept my personal files. There was a folder I rarely opened, filled with commendations and citations accumulated over 2 decades. The Distinguished Flying Cross from Helmand. The Meritorious Service Medal from my first command. Letters of appreciation from units I'd supported, personnel I'd mentored, missions that had gone right because someone made the hard call at the right time. I pulled out the DFC citation and read it again, not out of pride, but curiosity. The language was bureaucratic, clinical, for extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. Disregard for personal safety directly contributed to the successful extraction of personnel under hostile fire. What it didn't say, that I'd been terrified. That the radio chatter had been chaos, voices overlapping, someone screaming about casualties. That I'd made 3 gun runs at an altitude low enough to see individual faces, close enough that the aircraft took damage. I'd lied about in the debrief, because I didn't want to be grounded. What it didn't say, that David Hale had been one of those faces. That when I'd circled back for the final pass, I'd seen him dragging another soldier toward the extraction point, both of them moving in that horrible, slow-motion way that means someone's badly hurt. What it didn't say, that I'd gone home 3 weeks later and my parents had asked if I'd seen any action, and when I said yes, my father had said, "Well, don't let it go to your head." I put the citation back in the folder and closed it. The record was there. That was enough. The next morning, I arrived at the operations center at 05:30, earlier than necessary, but consistent with habit. The night crew was finishing their shift, handing off to the day team. I poured coffee, reviewed the overnight reports, and flagged 2 items for follow-up: a minor maintenance delay on one of the C-17s, and a personnel conflict in the logistics squadron that the first sergeant wanted me aware of. Lieutenant Sullivan found me around 0700. He was 24 now, no longer the nervous second lieutenant who'd emailed me 2 years ago. He'd grown into his role, earned the respect of his peers, and was being considered for early promotion. "Morning, ma'am." "Lieutenant. I wanted to thank you for the recommendation letter. It made a difference." I'd written it the previous month, a straightforward assessment of his performance and potential. No hyperbole, just facts. "You earned it." "Still, I know you don't have to do that." "Actually, I do. It's part of the job." He hesitated, then said, "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "How do you know when you're ready for the next level? When you're not just competent, but actually ready to lead at a higher level?" It was a better question than most officers asked. "You're never fully ready," I said. "The job is always bigger than you think it is. But you're ready enough when you stop worrying about whether people think you deserve it and start focusing on the people who need you to succeed." He nodded slowly. "That makes sense. You'll be fine, Sullivan. Just keep doing what you're doing." He left, and I returned to the reports. Around 0800, my executive officer, Major Karen Delacroix, knocked on the door frame. "Ma'am, you have a call on line 2. It's a Major Hale." I picked up. "Colonel James." "Good morning, ma'am. I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Major. What can I do for you?" "I wanted to give you a heads up. I'm putting Major James, in for a squadron commander position. He's ready, and I think he'll do well. But I wanted you to know before the official notifications went out." I felt a flicker of something, not quite pride, but close. "I appreciate that. He's come a long way. Took him a while to figure out that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, but he got there." "That's good to hear. He talks about you sometimes. Not in a 'my sister's a colonel' way, but in a 'this is how I learned to do it right' way." I thought you should know that too. I didn't know what to say to that, so I settled for, "Thank you, Major." "Anytime, ma'am. Take care." The call ended, and I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone. Ethan was going to command a squadron. He'd earned it on his own merits, shaped by a mentor who didn't tolerate shortcuts. I was genuinely glad for him. I didn't call to congratulate him. He'd get the official notification soon enough, and we'd talk then. For now, I had my own responsibilities. 3 months later, I received orders for my next assignment, command of a joint composite wing at Joint Base Lewis McChord. It was a significant step up, over 800 personnel, multiple mission sets, operations spanning the Pacific Theater. The kind of assignment that put you on the short list for flag officer consideration. Vargas, now Brigadier General Vargas, called to congratulate me. "You're moving into the big leagues, ally." "Feels like I've been in the big leagues for a while, ma'am." "This is different. This is where they're deciding if you're one of the handful who goes further. Joint command, strategic visibility, high operational tempo. You'll be under a microscope." "Understood. And ally? You're ready." I wouldn't have endorsed this if you weren't. The transition took 4 months. I handed over my current command to a sharp colonel named Morrison who'd been waiting for his shot. I briefed him on every detail, introduced him to key personnel, walked him through the landmines. By the time I left, he was ready. My change of command ceremony at Lewis McChord was held on a gray morning in September, rain threatening but holding off. The formation was larger this time, nearly 1,000 personnel standing in precise rows. Senior officers from 3 services attended, a reflection of the joint nature of the command. My parents didn't come. They'd called to say they couldn't make the trip, and I'd told them it was fine. It was. Ethan sent a message, wish I could be there, but I'm in the middle of a deployment workup. Proud of you, sis. Go show them how it's done. I read it twice, then filed it away. The ceremony itself was efficient. Orders read, guidon passed, brief remarks from the outgoing commander, then my turn. I kept it simple. Leadership at this level isn't about individual achievement. It's about creating the conditions for 800 people to do their jobs well. My role is to remove obstacles, provide resources, and make decisions that keep us mission ready. Your role is to execute with precision and integrity. Together, we'll accomplish what needs to be done. Let's get to work. The applause was steady, professional. I shook hands, accepted congratulations, and by 1300 hours I was in my new office, reviewing the operations plan for the next quarter. Major Delacroix had transferred with me, now serving as my deputy commander. She found me at my desk around 1500 hours, holding a folder. "Ma'am, you need to see this." It was a message from the Pentagon, informing me that I'd been selected for a strategic planning group focused on future air mobility operations. It was the kind of assignment that came with increased visibility and the potential for further advancement. "When do they need a response?" I asked. 2 weeks. I nodded. "I'll review it and get back to them." She left, and I sat there, looking at the message. 2 decades in, and the trajectory was still climbing. Part of me wanted to be satisfied, to say this is enough. But the other part, the part that had learned to let the record speak for itself, knew that there was still work to be done. I thought about Lieutenant Sullivan, now Captain Sullivan, mentoring the next generation of officers. I thought about Ethan, commanding a squadron and finally understanding what leadership actually meant. I thought about all the people I'd served with, led, learned from. Recognition, I'd learned, wasn't a destination. It was a byproduct of work done well over time. And the work was never finished. I pulled up my email and started drafting a response to the Pentagon. Outside, a C-17 roared down the runway, engine screaming, lifting into the gray sky. I watched it climb until it disappeared into the clouds, then turned back to my screen and kept working. The record would speak for itself. It always did. The Strategic Planning Group met quarterly in Washington, which meant I spent 1 week every 3 months away from Lewis McChord. The work was abstract compared to operational command, policy papers, capability assessments, long-range planning documents that wouldn't see implementation for years. But it mattered. The decisions made in those conference rooms would shape how the Air Force moved people and equipment a decade from now. I was the only O6 in a room full of generals and civilian defense analysts. The first meeting, I sat quietly, observing the dynamics. By the second meeting, I was contributing. By the third, people were asking for my input before I offered it. "Colonel James, what's your assessment of the Pacific logistics infrastructure? Colonel, you've run composite wings. How would this affect operational readiness? We need someone who understands the ground truth. Colonel James, can you brief us next quarter?" I said yes to all of it. Not because I was ambitious, but because the work needed to be done right. Between meetings, I ran my wing. We executed missions across the Pacific, humanitarian relief in the Philippines after a typhoon, routine supply runs to Guam and Okinawa, support for joint exercises with South Korea and Japan. My personnel were good, professionals who took pride in their work. I made it a point to know their names, their career goals, the problems that kept them up at night. One afternoon, I was walking through the maintenance hangar when a senior airman stopped me. Young, maybe 23, with grease-stained hands and uncertain eyes. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" Go ahead, airman. How do you know if you're good enough? Like, really good enough to keep doing this? I studied him. You worried about your performance? Not exactly. I see people who seem so confident, like they know they belong here. And I keep waiting to feel that way. What's your name? Senior Airman Marcus Webb, ma'am. How long have you been working on these aircraft, Webb? 3 years, ma'am. Any major incidents? Failed inspections? No, ma'am. My record's clean. Then you're good enough. Confidence comes later. Competence comes first. Keep doing the work, and eventually you'll stop questioning whether you belong. He nodded slowly. Thank you, ma'am. I started to walk away, then turned back. Webb, the people who seem most confident? Half of them are faking it. The difference is they don't let the doubt stop them from doing the job. Neither should you. He smiled, a quick flash of relief. Yes, ma'am. I thought about that conversation for days afterward. How much of my career had been doing the work despite doubt, despite dismissal, despite the quiet voice that said I wasn't enough. And how eventually, the work itself had become the answer. Ethan took command of his squadron in December. I couldn't attend, I was in the middle of a major exercise, but he sent photos afterward. Him standing at attention, his squadron arrayed behind him, the guidon in his hands. He looked competent, steady, like someone who'd earned his position. We spoke on the phone a week later. How's it going? I asked. Terrifying, he admitted. I thought I was ready, but actually being responsible for 150 people is different than I expected. It always is. How did you handle it? The first time you took command? I leaned back in my chair, remembering. I focused on the mission, not my feelings about the mission. I listened to my senior NCOs, made decisions based on information rather than ego, and accepted that I'd make mistakes. Did you? Make mistakes? Of course. Everyone does. The key is fixing them quickly and learning from them. Any advice? Take care of your people. Everything else flows from that. He was quiet for a moment. I'm trying to do it the way you would. Not copy you exactly, but use what you taught me. I didn't teach you much, Ethan. You taught me more than you think. I just wasn't paying attention. It was the most honest our conversations had ever been. No pretense, no competition. Just two officers trying to do difficult work well. You'll be fine, I said. Just remember why you're there. I will. Thanks, Ally. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my office and felt something close to peace. Not because Ethan had finally recognized what I'd done, but because he'd found his own path. The help I'd given years ago had mattered, even if it took him a decade to realize it. My parents called less frequently, but when they did, the conversations were different. Shorter, more substantive. My mother asked about my work without needing me to translate it into terms she found impressive. My father stopped comparing me to Ethan entirely. One evening in February, my mother called while I was reviewing a training schedule. Ally, I need to tell you something. Her tone made me set down the paperwork. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I owe you an apology. A real one. I waited. Your father and I spent years not seeing you. We were so focused on Ethan, on what we thought success looked like, that we didn't notice what you were accomplishing. And when we finally did notice, we acted like it was surprising instead of inevitable. That was wrong. Mom, let me finish. I'm not asking you to forgive us or pretend it didn't happen. I just need you to know that I see it now. What you've built, who you've become. And I'm sorry we weren't there for most of it. I took a breath. I appreciate that. Are we okay? You and me. We're honest. That's better than okay. She laughed, a soft, sad sound. You always were the smartest one in the family. I learned from good teachers. Just not the ones you expected. We talked for a few more minutes, surface-level updates about her garden and my father's health. When we hung up, I felt lighter. Not because the past had changed, but because we'd finally acknowledged it. In March, I briefed the strategic planning group on Pacific logistics challenges. I'd spent 6 weeks preparing, compiling data from my own operations and coordinating with other commands. The brief was 30 slides, dense with information, focused on capability gaps and potential solutions. I delivered it in 20 minutes, then opened for questions. They came fast, pointed, technical, sometimes challenging. I answered each one directly, no hedging, no corporate speak. When I didn't know something, I said so and offered to follow up. Afterward, a 2-star general approached me. Major General Patricia Keene, head of Air Mobility Command's Strategic Planning Division. That was excellent, Colonel. Thank you, ma'am. I mean it. You didn't just identify problems, you brought solutions. That's rare at this level. I've had good mentors. She smiled. Naomi Vargas speaks highly of you. General Vargas has been instrumental in my career. She thinks you're ready for your star. I blinked, momentarily thrown. A star. Brigadier General. Oh, 7. I appreciate her confidence, ma'am. Do you think you're ready? I considered the question carefully. I think I'm ready to serve at whatever level I'm needed. Good answer. She handed me her card. We'll be watching your career, Colonel. Keep doing what you're doing. She walked away, and I stood there in the empty conference room, holding a business card that felt heavier than it should. A star. I'd never let myself think that far ahead. I'd focused on the job in front of me, the people under my command, the mission at hand. But somewhere along the way, without trying, I'd built a record that suggested I could go further. I thought about Lieutenant Colonel Ally James from 20 years ago, fresh out of the cockpit and trying to figure out how to lead people who didn't think she belonged. I thought about all the times I'd been dismissed, overlooked, told I was too cautious or too aggressive or just too different. And I thought about Senior Airman Webb, asking if he was good enough. Competence comes first. Confidence comes later. I'd been competent for years. Maybe it was time to be confident too. I called Vargas, now General Vargas, that evening. You told General Keene I was ready for a star. I did. That's a significant endorsement. You've earned it, Ally. Multiple times over. The timing is right. You're running a major joint command successfully, you're contributing to strategic planning, and you have a record that speaks for itself. The board will consider you when they're ready. Until then, keep doing what you're doing. And if they don't select me, then you're still a colonel running one of the most important commands in the Air Force. That's not a consolation prize. She was right. I knew she was right. But the possibility had lodged itself in my mind, and I couldn't quite shake it. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Always. When did you stop proving yourself and start just being yourself? She laughed. About 2 years after I made general. So relatively recently. That's not encouraging. It's honest. Ally, you're going to spend your entire career with people questioning whether you belong. It doesn't stop at 07 or 08 or anywhere else. The difference is that eventually you stop caring about their questions and start trusting your own answers. When did that happen for you? When I realized that my record would outlast everyone's opinions, including my own doubts. I thanked her and hung up, her words settling into place alongside everything else I'd learned. The record would outlast the opinions. It always had. Spring turned to summer. My wing continued operations, executed exercises, maintained readiness. I mentored officers, resolved conflicts, made decisions that affected hundreds of lives. The work was hard, demanding, sometimes exhausting. It was also exactly what I'd trained for. In June, Ethan's squadron earned top marks in an operational readiness inspection. He called to tell me, his voice tight with relief and pride. We did it. Clean sweep, no major findings. Congratulations. That's significant. I couldn't have done it without remembering what you said. Take care of your people, everything else flows from that. You did the work, Ethan. Own it. I am. But I wanted you to know it mattered. What you taught me. I'm glad. We talked for a few more minutes, comparing notes on the challenges of command. When we hung up, I realized our relationship had finally become what it should have been all along, two professionals with mutual respect, shaped by different paths but heading in the same direction. In August, I received notification that I'd been nominated for the Brigadier General Selection Board. It wasn't a guarantee, the selection rate was low, and there were dozens of qualified colonels competing for a handful of slots. But it was acknowledgement that someone, somewhere, thought I belonged in that conversation. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Ethan. I told Vargas, because she deserved to know, and Major Delacroix, because she'd need to prepare for the possibility of my departure. Then I went back to work. The board would meet in October. I'd know by November. Until then, there was a wing to run, missions to execute, people to lead. The record would speak for itself. It always had, and it always would. Thanks for watching. If this hit home, tap like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a boundary boost today. Your turn. Have you ever been minimized by family in public? What did you do in the moment? When did you finally draw a line, and what changed after? Have you ever gotten unexpected recognition that flipped the room? If you were my brother, what's the right way to respond? What's one boundary you wish you'd set sooner?